Hi, this is Randy May. Welcome to my channel. If you get a chance, please hit the subscribe button. If you give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend from church or somebody you know, a relative. It would really help me push the channel out. Today we're going to talk about a hot subject that a lot of people really get lit up about in church: tattoos in the Bible. What does the Bible say about tattoos? It says in chapter 19, verse 28 of Leviticus, "You shall not make any cuts in your body for the dead, nor make any tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord." Now, let me say to you first, before I get too far into this, my wife and I do not have tattoos. That doesn't make me better than someone that does. It doesn't make me anything special. I'm just telling you what point of view I'm coming from. And so we need to realize, we hear people all the time. All the years I pastored and evangelized, there was always somebody that used this verse and said, well, he's got a tattoo on him. He's got 2 or 3 tattoos. And they get all upset, and I'd say, you need to back off a little bit. You're getting kind of out of line here. So I want to tell you, in this day that we live, many people have gotten all sorts of tattoos for all sorts of reasons. And so what someone does with their own body is between them and God. I have no way of getting into that and trying to interfere with how they live their life. And so as Christians, we have to have a heart-to-heart talk with ourselves, and that's what I did when my children were little. I get this from people all the time. They love to use this verse. So what do I do when they tell me about verse 28, "You shall not make any cuts in your body for the dead, or make any tattoo marks on yourself? I am the Lord," all right? Then I come back with verse 27. I say you need to read what verse 27 says. "You shall not round off the side growth of your head, nor harm the edges of your beard." All right? I told this to a pastor one time. I was really mad because he had a couple of guys come to church, he had tattoos. I said, okay, well, why don't you read verse 27? He goes, well, I don't understand that. I said, well, if 28 applies, so does 27. Where's your long hair hanging down off in your curls? Where's your big beard at? Where's it at? You don't have it. If 27 doesn't apply, 28 doesn't apply. You can't pick and choose what you like out of the Bible and throw away the stuff you don't like. Verse 27, just as much a command as verse 28. And you see these Jewish men on TV all the time. They have the long curls hanging down. They have the long beards on them, and that's their belief, and that's the way things were set up. But if we're going to enforce verse 28, then we need to enforce verse 27. The people don't like to hear that. They just want to hear what they want to hear. So if you don't have a long beard and you don't have curls hanging down on your face, is that a sin that you don't have that? We need to find out what's applicable and what's not. Many people were very violent, both in mourning and in worship, and the worship of idols, and tearing of their hair and scratching their body and cutting their flesh. This is what people did back then. In Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 1, it says, "You are the sons of the Lord your God. You shall not cut yourselves, nor shave your forehead for the sake of the dead." Tattooing was practiced in various pagans nations for all sorts of things, mostly representing the dead. So I guess I could equate that into this day and age. Let's say some young man or young woman has a grandparent or a parent, or maybe a brother or sister that dies. They put a picture of them on their arm. I'm just pointing here. I don't know where. They might put it on their leg, but they put a picture of them on their arm, and then they put their birth date when they were born and the day that they deceased on there. Well, that's representing the dead. And so some people do that today. And so we need to realize in early times, They were making all kinds of painting and cuttings on themselves and their flesh. They were connected with superstitions, and they were connected with anything disfiguring the body as an insult to God, who designed the body originally. So people back then did a lot of things to their body, and then for years and years around when I was growing up, you rarely ever seen anybody other than maybe a sailor that had an anchor, or maybe a guy. I did have one man that his whole family went to our church. Now he was a CEO Christian. He only came on Christmas and Easter. Nicest guy you'd ever meet, really nice. Had a big family, had 10 children. His wife and 10 children went to our church and were there every service. And they invited me to come home and spend the weekend with them one time. So I went home Friday night. I was supposed to spend Friday night, Saturday, and Saturday night, and then I'd go home Sunday after church. And so I went home with him, and he was working, and he took his shirt off. He was working out in the yard, and I saw a picture of a screaming eagle and 101, and I knew right away he was airborne. So I asked him, I said, I won't say his name. He may still be around. He probably isn't, but maybe his family does. So anyway, I'll just say Brother Smith. I said, were you in the Airborne Rangers, 101st? He said, yes, I was. And I said, wow. I said, I see your tattoo, and I saw that. It looked just like the emblem that they put on their uniform. And he said, yeah. He goes, I put my time in, and I saw a lot of action. He also fought at Bastogne. But you couldn't get hardly nothing out of him. Most of those soldiers, when I was growing up, that were from World War II, war had been over for 20, 25 years, roughly in that range there. Most of those guys wouldn't talk about it. You just couldn't get anything out of him. But he had a tattoo on his arm, and then his wife, when she saw me talking to him, and then he had his shirt off, he had one of the shirts that you wear underneath your shirt, but your arms aren't covered. She come out and she immediately said, tattoos aren't good and all this. And I told her, I said, ma'am, you don't have to explain anything to me. He was in the military. He was in the 101st Screaming Eagles. He fought in World War II. I don't have a problem. I guess she thought I'd tell my parents or say something to somebody. I was a kid. I was like 14 or 15 years old. I thought it was neat that he was in the Airborne Rangers. I never thought anything bad about him or anything derogatory towards him. This is why the law here in verse 28 is a big deal with a lot of people, and they love to talk about the tattoos, and they get aggravated about it if you don't agree with them. But when you tell them about verse 27, then they get a little upset at me. I had people get upset at me. They go, well, the Bible says in verse 28, and I said, I understand, but if it applies, verse 27 should apply. You can't just choose what you want. I think we have bigger fish to fry here than we do with 112,000 Americans last year. Now hear me out. 112,000 American people died last year from fentanyl overdoses. Fentanyl overdoses, 112,000 people. All right? To give you an example, the whole Vietnam War, which went on for 10 years, from 65 to 75, 58,000 men lost their lives in that war, which is horrible. I wish none of them would have lost their lives. Brave men that fought for their country. But we have 112,000 people die in 1 year from fentanyl, and our politicians act like most, not all, act like they don't even care, they don't even bring it up. Now, I've read figures of all sorts of things from different places, the CDC and NPR radio and several other sites. Best I can figure, the way I read, about 8,000 of them are for people under 25 years old, and I think it was around 4,000 or 5,000, maybe 6, I don't remember exactly, that died that were teenagers, anywhere from 10 to 19 years old. And I don't like gun violence, and I think that gun violence is horrible, and I hate it when people get shot. But only 440 people died last year in the United States from long rifles. Out of 333 million people, 440 died. We had over 8,000 kids die from fentanyl. Our big problem we ought to be chasing is fentanyl and putting a stop to them murdering our people. We've had police officers who inhaled it, didn't know it was in the car, that dropped over dead. Some of them they were able to revive, thank the Lord. Some didn't. We've had little children die in the home because the parents leave the stuff laying around. I mean, that's a serious problem. But we'll get back to tattoos. I'm just trying to tell you that these are things that I think the church ought to be praying about and ought to be trying to do what they can to help out to stop it. 112,000 people dying, 8,000 plus under 25 years old. About 4,000 to 6,000 of them are teenagers and little kids. You know, this is terrible. It's an epidemic. I mean, in 10 years, we'll have 1 million people die from fentanyl. All right. So it's, to me, on me, this is me talking, it's way up here on my list more than the long rifles down here. I mean, that's a lot of people dying from that. And we need to realize that tattoos are a touchy subject in church with a lot of people. And so I think that there's other things more important than wasting your time trying to get people to not put tattoos on their body or getting onto them if they did. Let them work out their own salvation. They may have had them before they ever gave their heart to the Lord. Our family, we raised our children in church. We raised them in the way of the Lord. And we prayed for our children. We taught them to pray every night before they go to bed. We taught them to pray for the Lord when they were sick or had problems. We told them that how God loved them. We took them to church every Sunday. They were in Sunday school. They were taught as teens. And so when they became adults and moved out on their own, then they had to work out their own salvation in fear and trembling and decide what they want to do with themselves and their own bodies. I am no longer responsible for what they do. They don't live with me no more. They're adults. And so they can choose what they want to do. You can't go around telling adults what they can do and what they can't do. And if I feel like the Lord wants me to say something to one of my adult children, I will. But I'll tell them, the Lord's impressed us on me, I want to talk to you about it. But I don't offer unsolicited advice to my adult children who, have lived quite a few years outside the home. And it's up to them to work out their own salvation and pass on their beliefs to their children. And hopefully some of what I taught them will trickle down to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. I don't voice my opinion with them without being asked. We gave them a good foundation of Christianity and what the Bible had to say about things. And one time, one of my kids came to me about the tattoos, and they were married, an adult, and out of the house, wanted my opinion. So I gave them the same opinion I'm giving you today. Here's verse 27, here's verse 28. You go on and work out your own salvation, but I'm here to tell you, this is what the Bible has to say about it. But the Lord, I'm going to read you one in 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance, his height, or his stature, because he sees not as man sees. All right, God don't see like we do. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So you look at a person and see tattoos on them, and you draw your own conclusion. But the Lord don't look at the outward appearance, he looks at the heart. The Lord is more interested in what's on the inside than the outside. I've had people tell me that they were going to get their tattoos removed. And I said, oh, you are? And they said, yeah. One guy held his hands up to me, and one said love, the other said hate. He goes, I gave my heart to the Lord a couple of years ago, and I don't like that hate being on there. I don't think that's good. And I said, oh, well, I didn't know that it was bothering you, and he said, I'm going to get it removed. I said, okay. I had another girl told me she was getting a tattoo removed off hers because it was something that she felt it was inappropriate. And she said, I got it when I was about 18 or 19. I'm 35 now. I got 4 kids. I don't want to have this on me no more. So I thought about covering it up with another tattoo, try to, blend it all. But I'm just going to get it removed. And I said, okay. People need to decide what they want to do with their body when it comes to tattoos. And they need to work that out with the Lord. And we shouldn't be so judgmental at people If we see somebody at church has a tattoo on them, live and let live. Let God and them work it out. Stay out of it. It's none of your business. Oh, I know that people don't like to hear that, but I'm here to tell you, I'm not saying that go out and put one on yourself. I'm not saying go take yours off. I'm telling you, don't be so hard on people, because God don't look at the outward appearance. He looks at the heart. And we're talking about if things are applicable or not, all right? And so we have to realize that we can't pick out just what scriptures we like out of the Bible. In Leviticus chapter 24, 19 and 20, it says, if a man injures his neighbor just as he has done, so it shall be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Just as he has injured the man, so shall be he inflicted on him. So, eye for eye, tooth for a tooth. Now let's see what Matthew chapter 5 verses 38 and 39 says in the New Testament. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. So the Lord's telling us not to be an eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Now, I've heard a lot of old timers when I was growing up say that. He needs to get what's coming to him. Eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Yeah, it does say that back in the Old Testament. But what did the Lord say about it in the New Testament? He said, I have heard it said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. So the Lord's saying, that's not applicable. This is. This is how I want you to act. All right? So if that's the truth there, you understand, you need to understand the whole Bible and rightly divide the word of truth. And if you're going to do that, you need to do it the right way. Now, in closing, let me say this. Don't pick out one verse out of the Bible and use it to get at people. All right? God don't like that. He don't want that. And so, such as the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's in the Old Testament. But when you turn to the New Testament and read what it says here, it's different. All right? Just like in the Old Testament, you had to go sleep with a woman to be a sinner, to sin. But Jesus said, no, if you lust and want to do it, and you picture yourself doing it with her, you've already done it. You don't have to sleep with her to sin. And you don't have to go out and kill someone to be a sin. If you wish you could do it, you already killed them in God's eyes. Things have changed, folks, and you need to realize what the scriptures are about and how applicable they are and how to use them. So we don't need to pick out one verse and use it against people. If we all went eye for eye and a tooth for a tooth, we'd all be walking around blind and toothless because we're going at everybody. You can't apply that to everybody. And then use the Word of God the right way. Learn to divide the Word of truth in the right way, into the right time, and whether it's applicable or not. What some people like, other people may not like. What some people think is okay, other people think it isn't okay. All right, need to realize, agree to disagree. I may not agree with everybody, but that doesn't make me right. Just because I don't agree with them, just because I look at things different, doesn't make me right and make them wrong. What counts is what God has to say. God is our judge. Read the scriptures correctly, rightly divide the word of truth, and don't go at people when you see that they're dressed a certain way or they have a tattoo on them or whatever. That's not your job. You're not the tattoo policeman. You're not the clothes policeman. You're not the hair policeman. Thank God for that. I don't have any anymore. Don't have to worry about it. When I was young, you can look on my channel. There's a video about it. But I had 2 or 3 churches that called me and asked me to preach sight unseen because they knew a pastor. A pastor said he preached here, did a good job. A lot of the young people really liked him, young married couples and all this. I was in my 20s. And I showed up and and I had a Fu Manchu mustache. My hair only come down to about here, and I had long sideburns, and they wouldn't let me preach. They showed me the door, and they asked me to leave. And the third time it happened, I was married to my wife, and she cried when we got in the car. I told her, don't worry about it. She goes, but, you know, they were real. I said, don't worry about it. It happens. You know, he never saw it. If I knew you looked like you did, the preacher said to me, I would have never called you to come preach at my church. That mustache and those long sideburns. And I said, well, look up at the picture of Jesus on your platform. He's got long hair and a beard. He goes, that's Jesus, that's not you. And he was in Nazareth. I said, oh, okay, all right. I said, well, then fine. Thank you, Pastor. I stuck my hand out, told him I'd be leaving. He wouldn't even shake my hand. I mean, you can't do that to people. But people are just people, and they are what they are, and you have to learn to be a little thick-skinned about it and realize that you can't let people like that get you. You know, they're looking at the outward appearance, and God looks at the heart. Oh, let me add this. I was wearing a three-piece suit and a tie, and I had brand new cowboy boots on underneath my suit, and so I looked very presentable and was dressed up. I even showed up at one church, and I forgot my tie. They said I couldn't preach in their pulpit without a tie. So he snatched one off one of his elders and had me put the tie on, or I couldn't preach. I mean, people are just, you know, they just go overboard sometimes. But I put the tie on so that I could preach the sermon, and I got about halfway through my sermon, I took the tie off. I told everybody, stretch your hands forward. They all stretched their hands forward. They thought they were going to pray for something. And I held the tie up, and I said, now everybody do this. They all did that, and I said, there goes the tie. And I went on and preached. I finished my sermon without that tie around my neck. I was hot. That platform was 3 feet higher than the people were sitting, and the heat was coming in, and I was feeling hot, and the tie came off. And then before long, the coat came off. Before it was all done, the vest was gone too. So, you know, people just are people. But try not to be hard on people, and try to learn how to rightly divide the word of truth and know what you're talking about. When you go at people, you shouldn't go at people. That's just food for thought. And don't forget to please subscribe. Please share this with someone at your church or a relative or someone. Help me get this pushed out to other people where my channel will reach out. And meanwhile, I want to thank you for your time. This time till next time, Randy says so long. I love you. Have a wonderful day.